and when you know microphone technology, and then you take the right microphone and you have it.
Right, right.
And that was the next point. I mean, I was really looking into the drum, all those details. I got the sound, which I wanted. Said, okay, now you have the sound, fine. But wait a minute. Years ago, you went back in the studio, you know, in the control room. Remember this one studio job what you had? You heard your own drum set sounding like this when you play. Went back in the control room and said, it's not sounding the same like what you heard in the. I said, okay, now go in the microphone technology. So then I went through the whole microphone technology. Which kind of capsules you have, which kind of material they use, what's the difference? You know, when you have a capsule, which is a brass capsule, it could be a Teflon capsule, it could be, you know, 1-inch capsules, a small condenser, the big condenser microphone, dynamic microphones, ribbon microphones, and tube mics. What are they doing? You know, what's the difference? And if you know physics, you know, I mean, we talk all the time about drums, but the next big challenge is cymbals. Because a drum, these are different parts. The cymbal is only one piece.
Right.
And I said before, I had the pleasure to make 2 years metal school, and I had also the pleasure to drove down to Paisti very often, and I was there also when I was 11, first time, you know, 1982. It was really 1982 was the year, you know, where I got through also first time when I saw Paisti, when I saw Sono, the factory.
As an impressionable youth, they made big impressions on you, obviously. 'Cause
And
here we are all these years later, and you're still on that path.
yeah, and still, I mean, you know how they do it. Yeah, and then on the end, what can I say? When you meet somebody like Joe Porcaro, which is, I would say, the biggest influence to me.
Now, tell me how you met him and how you started working together.
Okay,
How we doing for? We still got tape left?
Well, it's 1:20.
They haven't thrown us out of the studio yet, so we're just going to keep
Okay.
going. You know?
But we have 20 minutes left.
okay.
All right,
Then we
great.
have because we have to have the other project. Okay.
Right. So Joe,
you know what I tell you now. I go now, make it completely raw, and then you calculate. Okay.
Okay. Joe Porcaro.
One moment. I started playing drums when I was 3. In 1979, I had my first gig with my brothers and sisters. Then we went, you know, we made folk music at that time. And we had the pleasure to play in Germany a lot, you know, but we also went over to Canada, you know, in 1982, makes a music festival in Toronto, and made a lot of gigs, you know, in Europe and different countries. And with this, I got involved, you know, to the Sonar factory. I got involved with the Paisti cymbal factory at that time and learned my first steps about instruments, you know, how they make an instrument, how they make a cymbal, you know, and this was my first influence with this. In 1992, I had a different band at that time, did German rock, and we were in the studio, and I really had a bad experience at that time. I found out myself, I said, wait a minute, you was all time playing with your brothers and sisters together. So when we were recording, we recorded directly to 2 tracks, that's it. And that was the first time when I was in the studio, you know, that they really want, okay, now we make first the drums, multi-track, then the next, and next. Okay, that's what they want. But the sound was not right. It was that was not this what I heard before when I recorded, you know, it was different. And with this experience, I said, okay, Uli, you have to work on yourself. Maybe you do mistakes, how you play the drums. I mean, you never had a teacher before, you know. And I came over to, you know, to a school which called the Modern Drum School in Germany. And all the teachers at the Modern Drum School are related at that time to the PIT, the Percussion Institute of Technology, to the MI here in LA. and
Musicians Institute here.
Musicians Institute,
Yeah.
yeah, and they got lessons from Joe Porcaro at that time. I mean, Joe was there till 1996 when he went over. I mean, after that he went over to the Los Angeles Music Academy, which is today the Los Angeles College of Music
Right.
in Pasadena. And I got involved with the school, you know, started from point zero and restarted to learn drums. And when I learned to play the drums again, I recognized a lot of technology which I picked up before, you know, in all the years, you know, said, okay, now it makes sense, you know.
Now I know how to use
So,
this.
yeah, here and there, and, you know, and I learned a lot with this. And in 1995, I had the chance to come over to LA and met the first time Joe Porcaro here. I mean, the school in Germany, the founder put me together with Joe. We hooked up, and the good thing was, 3 weeks before I went over to LA, I met by an accident, I have to say, Mike Porcaro in the backstage of a festival in Freiburg, south of Germany, when Toto played there, because we went into the backstage. All of a sudden, Simon Phillips saw me, and Simon looked at me and said, I know you guy, we was last year on the Music Fair Frankfurt, and we talked about microphones. I said, yes, that's me, you know, and
Nice. Simon Phillips recognized you. That's cool.
So, and yeah, and Mike and I, we got friends after that, and then I came to LA, got my first lesson with Joe Porcaro, and Joe, I have to say, is the biggest influence what I ever got, and I mean, still, since today, we are really close. It's like it's family friends. It's really like he is really sweetheart.
Now, what is it that you got from him? I mean, the Porcaros are a very famous musical family in LA. You know, they're Jeff, Steve, Mike, and Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Between them, my God, you know, hundreds of millions of records, right? But how? What was the relationship like with the family?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that with Joe and the rest of the family.
I mean,
I mean, you got there through meeting Mike. That was pretty neat. And then Joe in L.A.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's one of those situations. You meet somebody the first second, and you know there is something. And what can I say? I mean, I had my first lesson with Joe, and I went into this lesson. I came to his house. First, we made an appointment at the MI at that time, but because of a studio session, we skipped that and say, okay, you come. I have the first lesson at his house. I went into went into his house, and you see all the pictures, you know, like, you know, from the successful group Toto, and said, oh, and you know, Jeff passed away 3 years before, you know, and he passed away in '92, and I went into his lesson and asked him, you know, okay, here I am. I would like to learn, but I don't know my mistakes. So maybe I play something and you look after and say what we can do, you know. So that's how we started. I think at that time, to be honest, I have to say, a lot of people came to him and asked, how did Jeff play this, how did Jeff play that, and they came more to get the things how Jeff did. Obviously, yes. I mean, Joe and Jeff. I mean, there was a lot of knowledge, you know, but it was not my approach to go to this lesson and ask the father, Jeff, how Jeff played this or this. And later he said to me that was very special for him also, because there was a lot of people who asked him all the time, and bottom of my heart, I mean, you cannot ask the father all the time and say, how does your son play that? And your son passed away 3 years ago. I mean, that's, no. So I did that, and first lesson, and then at the end I said, Uli, what are you doing the next 3 years? Uli, what are you doing the next 3 weeks here in LA? No plans. Okay, tomorrow I have a studio session. If you like, you can come with. On Tuesday, there is something at Back Potato. We can go to this. And all of a sudden, he booked my whole schedule. I was like, okay. Okay. And I said, wait a minute, Joe, I have a problem. We have to call Mike, because Mike said to me, when I'm here, I have to call Mike because I have to come to Capital A, because they're mixing the Tamboo record. Okay, wait a minute. He picked up the phone and, Mike, what's going on there? And yeah, that was my first time when I met the Toto guys here at the studio. And
that was here at Capitol Studios.
Capitol Studio.
Very cool.
And when Steve Genewick and we talked about, Steve said, I was there too at that time. I said, you have to, yeah. I mean, so see, Steve, we know each other since 1995, but no, we had no idea.
That's pretty cool.
It's really funny. I mean,
all of these full circle things, you know.
It's really funny. So, the Porcaro family is really a sweetheart. It's what can I say? You have to experience this. It's to tell this. It's really hard to tell. It's great.
Okay, well we'll leave it at that. And
I mean, it's a gift. It's a gift. I mean, when you're involved with them, it's a gift. And my relationship also to Mike was really, really deep and really strong. And yeah, I mean, we were really close friends. And when I say friends, we were friends. And we have in Germany a saying also, if you have emergency, if you have problems, then you know who your friends are.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Mike had the ALS thing, and still there.
Now, you mentioned earlier about sources and Remo.
Yeah.
And we should talk a little bit about Remo. You've actually visited the Remo plant in Valencia, California, which is in our neck of the woods in Santa Clarita. Tell us a little bit about your experiences with Remo and how you met them and the things that you've done together.
Okay, I mean, maybe from the starting point with the drums again. I learned from Joe Porcaro, a lot in my lessons also about drum technology and sticks, how they influence the sound, how drum heads influence the sound. And Joe Porcaro, he was at that time already with other drum head company, but showed me something which calls the tap test.
The tap test, yes.
And learning that from Joe, I went over to the Remo factory and had the pleasure to meet for first time Remo Belly at that time. And I made a factory tour and understood a little bit more about how they make drum heads. And I mean, that was for me a bath. It's like, hey, when you see how they do it, and myself, I had the pleasure to have this 2 years metal school. You understand a little bit the technology, how they do it. It was really fun for me. And in 1998, I have to say, I tested in my studio when I went into the drums, how a drum head is interacting with the wood, because I really tried to find out which kind of wood is interacting with the drums, with the drum head. Mm-hmm. And I tested around 250 different drum heads.
Wow.
Just only changing and changing and changing, and try this, try that, and make notes which wood is acting with which drum head. And a big influence at that time was also Bernard Purdie. I met at that same time Bernard Purdie, who made a big influence on that as well. And Remo Belli, I mean, just a sweetheart, you know, show you all those kind of technology stuff. And I mean, hey, those Remo drum heads, they were recorded thousands and thousands records, you know. I mean, also the other drum head companies, for sure, but Remo is
The gold standard.
since ever in the business, you know.
Mhm.
So, and drum heads affect a lot the sound also on the drum itself. I mean, we talked about the shell, we talked about the drum hoops, but also the drum heads, and you have to have a good drum head. I mean, we can talk about 1 hour about tuning. I mean, on the end, it could be within a minute, half minute.
And
You
there-
can have a good drum sound out of it.
And there are
If you know how the system works.
And there are different thicknesses of drum heads too.
Yeah,
There's
you know,
all variations
yeah, right.
and, you know,
But on the